Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. You know those picture-perfect suburbs you see in movies? Yeah, that's where I lived. Or at least that's what it looked like from the outside. Behind the manicured lawns and those fake smiles, something truly sinister was brewing. This is the story of my time living in a suburban hell. Imagine this. It's 7 p.m. The sky's that weird in-between color, and I'm trying to motivate myself to work out. Finding the perfect mix of songs to psych myself up for a workout while also ignoring the impending doom creeping in from my neighbors. That's a whole other level. It's all about finding that balance between I'm a strong, independent person who can handle anything and I'm pretty sure someone's watching me through the window. Okay. Real talk for a sec. How annoying are mid-video ads? Like, you're totally engrossed in whatever true crime story or makeup tutorial you're watching, and then, bam, some random product you've never even heard of pops up. But you know what? A girl's got to get paid, and those sponsorships help keep the lights on. So let's hear it for Raycon. These earbuds are my saving grace, especially when I'm trying to drown out the sounds of my neighbours fighting, or worse. Plus, they're super cute and come in a million colours, so I can pretend I'm a normal person listening to music instead of, reliving my traumatic past for the internet. So, let me tell you about this apartment complex. From the outside, it wasn't that bad, but there was this vibe, this underlying creepiness that I couldn't shake. The hallways were always dimly lit, even during the day, and there was this weird smell that lingered everywhere. And the neighbours? Don't even get me started. Every night I'd hear these strange noises, banging on the walls, muffled screams, and this one sound that I swear sounded like a cat being strangled. One night, I was babysitting for this family down the hall. The kids were already asleep, and I was just chilling on the couch, watching some mindless reality TV. Suddenly, I heard a knock on the door. I figured it was just one of the neighbours, maybe needing to borrow some sugar or something. But when I opened the door, it was this guy, Bob. He lived across the hall, and I'd seen him around a few times. He was an older guy, kind of creepy looking, with these beady little eyes that seemed to follow your every move. Finally, I asked him if he needed something. He just shook his head and then, without a word, turned around and walked away. After that night, Bob started showing up everywhere. I'd see him in the laundry room, lurking around the mailboxes, even just standing in the hallway watching me. He'd always try to strike up conversations, but they were always super awkward and uncomfortable. I tried to be polite, but I was honestly terrified of him. There was just something off about him, something that screamed danger. I started carrying pepper spray with me everywhere I went. Things escalated pretty quickly with Bob. One day I was coming home from the grocery store, struggling to carry all my bags, when Bob appeared out of nowhere, offering to help. I tried to politely decline, but he insisted. As we were walking up the stairs to my apartment, he accidentally brushed his hand against my butt. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. When we got to my door, I thanked him quickly and fumbled with my keys, desperate to get inside. As I was closing the door, I saw him standing there, that creepy smile back on his face. After the touching incident, I became convinced that Bob was watching me. I started noticing little things, like my blinds would be slightly open in the morning, even though I always closed them before bed. Or I'd find things moved around in my apartment, just slightly out of place. One day I was cleaning up my closet when I found a box full of my old journals. As I was reading, I noticed that someone had written in one of my journals, in red ink no less. It said, "You're even prettier in person." I dropped the journal like it was a hot coal, my entire body trembling with fear. I knew I had to get out of that apartment. Bob was clearly unhinged and I was terrified of what he might do next. I started looking for a new place. But in the meantime, I was trapped. One night, I was walking home from the library. It was late, and the streets were deserted. As I was approaching my apartment building, I noticed a figure hiding in the shadows across the street. My heart leaped into my throat. I knew it was Bob. I quickened my pace, my keys digging into my palm. Suddenly, Bob stepped out of the shadows and started walking towards me. I broke into a run, my lungs screaming for air. I finally managed to find a new apartment and moved out as quickly as I could. I was so relieved to be free from that nightmare from Bob. A few months later, I ran into one of my old neighbours from that apartment complex. We got to talking and I asked her how things were going. She told me about this new guy who had moved into the building, a real creep. He'd been harassing some of the female residents and even tried to break into one of their apartments. I felt a chill run down my spine as I listened to her describe him. It was Bob. He was back. My old neighbour told me that several women in the building had filed police reports against Bob and they were trying to get a restraining order against him. I decided to contact the police myself and tell them about my experience with Bob. I gave them all the details I could remember, and I even showed them the journal entry he had written in my journal. The police took my statement seriously, and I knew that my testimony, combined with the other women's accounts, would hopefully be enough to put Bob away for good.
We'll take it from here. Thank you for coming forward.
So, Bob wasn't the only creepy thing about that apartment complex. There was also my downstairs neighbour, Savannah. Savannah was obsessed with all things supernatural. She was always talking about ghosts and demons and had this whole shrine set up in her living room with crystals and candles and a Ouija board. Now, I'm not one to judge anyone's beliefs, but Savannah's obsession with the occult was definitely a little intense. She would spend hours in her apartment, chanting and lighting candles, and I swear I could hear strange noises coming from her place at all hours of the night. One day, Savannah invited me over to her apartment for a séance. I tried to politely decline, but she was insistent. I didn't want to be rude, so I reluctantly agreed. When I got to her apartment, she had the whole place decked out in black sheets and candles. There were 3 other people there, all of whom I recognized from the building. They were all sitting around Savannah's Ouija board, their fingers lightly touching the planchette. Savannah started chanting in a language I didn't understand, and the room seemed to grow colder. Suddenly the planchette started moving across the board, stopping on different letters. It spelled out a message: "Help me." I found out later that Savannah had been kicked out of the apartment complex. Apparently, she had gotten into a huge fight with one of the other residents, and things had escalated to the point where the police were called. But that wasn't even the craziest part. One of the people who had been at that séance with Savannah contacted me a few weeks later. She told me that Savannah had been planning to kill the resident she had fought with. She had even recruited a few people from the building to help her. They were going to use black magic to get rid of her. I was absolutely horrified. Looking back, I realized that apartment complex was like a magnet for crazy. Bob, Savannah, the creepy noises, the weird vibes. It was all just too much. I'm so glad I got out of there when I did. I don't even want to think about what might have happened if I had stayed. I live in a much nicer, safer neighborhood now. I haven't seen or heard from Bob or Savannah since I moved out of that complex. I try not to think about them, but their faces still haunt my nightmares sometimes. I learned a valuable lesson from my experience. You never really know what's going on behind closed doors. Sometimes the true horror is closer to home than we think. It's been years since I escaped that apartment complex, but the memories still linger. The relief of moving out was indescribable, like a weight lifted from my chest. But a part of me can't help but feel a shiver down my spine, knowing that people like Bob and Savannah are out there lurking in the shadows. Sometimes the most ordinary places can harbor the most extraordinary horrors.